So, Pray for the Gods was developed by a team of 3 developers who made up a studio called No Matter Studios and released in 2021. It's a third-person survival action game that is reminiscent of games like Shadow of Colossus and Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. So right off the bat, I like the play on words of the title of this game. It basically begs the question, are we praying to the gods and asking for their help, or are we pray for the gods, like pigs to the slaughter? Kind of asks the questions of whether or not the gods in this game are going to be our enemies or our friends. See, the game hasn't even started yet, my curiosity's already piqued. So a quick overview of the game. You are a nameless protagonist who washes up on the shore of these mysterious islands that's inhabited by 8 gods and a bunch of lesser creatures, and is trapped in a state of perpetual winter. And pretty quickly to me, it became evident that this game is heavily inspired by Norse mythology. So right off the bat, you got this ambivalent wolf that gets larger and larger with every god you defeat, and eventually ends up resembling the giant wolf in Norse mythology, Fenrir. On top of that, you got all kinds of Draugr-looking enemies that are similar to Norse mythology, and you got this perpetual winter that's very similar to the one that occurs before Ragnarok, and then just the general appearance of your protagonists having like this Nordic look to them. It all just seems to be Norse mythology inspired. That being said though, the actual story itself is pretty enigmatic and kind of hard to interpret. In a general sense, the protagonist washes up on these mysterious islands and then immediately sets out to hunt down these 8 gods that are inhabiting different regions of the island. And every time she defeats one of the gods, she falls unconscious and is dragged back to this spirit well by that wolf, and every time she defeats one, the well seems to get fuller and fuller, and the wolf drinks from it and gets larger and larger. So a quick side note of the game, every time you defeat a god, it actually says released when you get an achievement for it, whereas when you get achievements for other types of enemies, it says defeated, and I feel like that plays a role into the overall story of the game, because it sounds like you're releasing the gods, not necessarily killing them or defeating them. Which makes sense in the context of the gameplay, because what you end up doing is actually just breaking these sigils all around their body that are junction points for all these chains, so it really does seem like you're releasing them. You're not actually like injuring them. I mean, who knows, maybe you're releasing them from these arenas that they're trapped in, or their physical forms, but in any case, it seems like their spirits return to the spirit well, which the wolf drinks, and again, gets bigger and bigger and bigger. There's also a myriad of notes that you find all around the land that details past clans led by religious prophets that are also seeking out the gods and seeking to capture them, but the reason why is never explained. Now, I really don't want to spoil the epic climax of this game, which makes everything up to that point totally worth it, but maybe at the end of the video I'll do a quick overview of what I think is happening, and for anyone who doesn't care about spoilers. All I'm going to say is I think my Fenrir, Ragnarok, Norse mythology comparisons are pretty right on the money, but if you told me I was wrong, I wouldn't be too shocked. And so on that point of defeating all the gods, this game is very similar to Shadow of Colossus, but really expands on what that game did originally. So Shadow of Colossus famously only consists of boss fights with no traditional enemies or minions along the way. And the really enjoyable thing about the boss fights in that game is that each one is basically a puzzle that requires some critical thinking and platforming skills in order to overcome. And Pray for the Gods is essentially the same concept, but with some actual traditional enemies and other gameplay mechanics to expand upon the journey toward each boss. Like I said, there's some Draugr and some mini-bosses that give you some really good loot, but perhaps the most important system in this game is the survival system. This is where I get the comparisons to Legend of Zelda from, but it's a pretty unique survival system where you gotta manage your health, your stamina, your hunger, your sleep, and perhaps most importantly, your warmth. I mean, with this game being set in a harsh and perpetual winter, you're constantly having to find sources of warmth like campfires or shelters, or even using consumables that will increase your warmth meter. And another aspect I really enjoy about this game is that there's a pretty intuitive crafting system where you can craft consumables, weapons, ammunition, all that good stuff. And because the game features an item degradation system that is pretty brutal, you are constantly having to search out supplies and remake items like axes or swords or bows and whatnot. And so with all this put together, it really makes every journey to a new boss and a new area of a map a survival endeavor in and of itself, where you're constantly foraging and hunting and finding ways to stay warm while trying to survive against random attacks against you. It's a very enjoyable process. And it's all a very welcome addition to the Shadow of Colossus formula, though I gotta say the game still kinda lacks in variety, which was a similar problem with that game. I mean, the weapon types are pretty basic, the enemies you fight are basically the same thing over and over again, and there's very little opportunity for progression in this game, outside of occasionally being able to upgrade your health or your stamina, or maybe get 1 or 2 new armor sets. Seeing as though that these systems really felt like more of a way to just make the journey toward each boss encounter more enjoyable in a very straightforward way, I can't knock on it too much. Because, of course, the boss fights are the true point of this game, and they are as epic as you would hope for. I mean, I really love the variety of the bosses and the ways in which you have to approach the puzzles, which are typically informed by skills that you learn along your journey to that boss, which is very much appreciated. But just like Shadow of Colossus, at the end of the day, it's all about just finding a way to get on the monster and then holding on for dear life while managing your stamina and finding its weak points. Which I stated before, these sigils where all the chains connect together, and so it kind of goes to that point of you're releasing the monsters. You're not necessarily killing them, like in Shadow of Colossus, you're stabbing them in the head with a sword, but this one, you're just breaking these chains, basically. Unfortunately, also like Shadow of Colossus, there's a lot of jankiness when it comes to the climbing mechanics during these boss fights. Like, there's so many times where I didn't understand why I lost my grip, and the camera angle would switch all around when the boss is flying around different directions or turning, and just kind of made everything really complicated and irritating. But don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it was so bad that it wasn't playable. It was still a very enjoyable experience. And with all that being said, I think the developers did an excellent job at building this bleak and grandiose world where everything feels immense and meaningful, and it's just pretty epic playing. It's not the best graphics ever, but it's got this really unique art style where colors really pop out amongst the dreary landscape that exists in every corner of these mysterious islands. And the music of the game, I would describe it as haunting and epic, kind of depending on the situation that you're in, but it just fits perfectly with the tone of the game in general. And from my memory, there's barely a lick of dialogue in this game, but there's enough environmental and contextual clues that you feel like you always know what you're doing and why, and how this place came to be and everything like that, while still maintaining the mystery and the uncertainty of everything. I mean, overall, it's a short and sweet game that's definitely worth playing, and for only being developed by 3 people, they really should be commended for their achievement. So for the game's story, assuming my interpretation is right, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. I think it's an excellent premise, but on face value, there really just isn't much of a story at all, and I just think so much more could have been done to expand upon the protagonist and the events in this world. For the gameplay, I would give it a 6 out of 10. I really loved the survival elements of the game, and I thought the puzzles were really well thought out, but it was janky to play and just kind of got redundant after a while, which took me out of it a little bit. And for the quality of the game, I would give it a 7 out of 10. The music and visuals were excellent, and they really reinforced the bleakness and epic scale of the world, and the game systems function great, but at the end of the day, it's just not the most polished product, and I don't know that there's anything unique enough for me to give it a higher score than that. And so with Pray for the Gods ending with an 18 out of 30, would make it number 4 on my game's ranking list, and it's a worthwhile game to play. And you know, if I were a kid renting this from the rental store again, I would have thoroughly enjoyed my playthrough, but it likely would have been a one-time rental and probably never again. Alright, so with all that out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and take a shot at what I think is going on at the end of the game, so if you don't want to see that, go ahead and leave a like if you like what I did here. Leave a comment about any games that I'm going to do in the future, if you have any thoughts about what I said about this game, and follow if you'd like to see stuff I do here in the future. Thank you all, and here's for my spoilers. Alright, so in summary, I think this whole game is about Ragnarok. It seems like the clans and the prophets that led them were trying to enslave these gods to try to prevent Ragnarok somehow. Somehow maybe they were keeping Fenrir's power low, and that's why he's a small wolf when you first meet him. And I think the events of the game occur during Fimbulwinter, which in Norse mythology is the 3-year winter that exists before Ragnarok occurs. If you don't know who Fenrir is, he's basically the giant wolf that's prophesized to kill Odin during Ragnarok and basically leads to the downfall of the gods. Basically, Ragnarok spells the end of the world. It's set aflame and all the old gods die, and eventually it's born anew. So with all that being said, I think the clans and their prophets were just trying to save this world by enslaving these gods, and then Fenrir uses your character after seeing you kill the first god, and basically has you take out the rest to help him gain power in preparation for Ragnarok. And I think this is all verified as the end of the game involves this icy frozen world being set aflame, you're fighting these fire giants, and Fenrir's helping you fight, and there's these spirit children that seem to work with you to birth this new god that comes out of that spirit well. And after you defeat everything, this world seems to go away and this new desert area is formed. And I don't think it makes your character evil, they're just helping bring about Ragnarok with Fenrir. It's something that seems like it's inevitable to happen, and your character has played a role in it. It is a shame that they don't let her join the new world. She just becomes like a undead Draugr thing at the end, but I think that's just more so you can keep exploring the world and having fun with the game. So as always, thank you again for watching, I really appreciate it. I'm trying to build this channel into something more, something that will help people get through their days like a lot of other YouTubers have done for me. So if If you like what you saw here, please leave a like, I'd really appreciate it. If you have any thoughts about things I said, or any ideas for games you'd like me to review in the future, please leave a comment, that would also be very appreciated. And if you want to see the stuff I do here in the future, go ahead and subscribe. Help me build this thing. Peace.